Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books. And Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are delighted to be here with all of you tonight to celebrate Sizzle Reel. Sizzle Reel is an unputdownable queer coming-of-age rom-com about life and love in Hollywood. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by Charis's Queer Romance Book Club. The Queer Romance Book Club is a group of adults that reads and discusses queer romance stories of all kinds. And so we have invited one of our Queer Romance Book Club co-hosts, Kira Apple, who uses she, her pronouns, to be with us tonight to discuss the book with the author, Carlyn Greenwald. So Kira is a full-time bookseller at Charis and co-facilitator of the book club. She's originally from Eastern Pennsylvania. She received her bachelor's and master's in English from Kutztown University. She's a lifelong lover of fantasy, sci-fi, and romance literature and media. She can be found playing video games and TTRPGs, writing and wrangling her 3 cats. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram. I'll drop her handles in the chat. And the person of the hour tonight is author Carlyn Greenwald, who writes romantic and thrilling page turners for teens and adults. A film graduate and former Hollywood lackey, she now works in publishing. She resides in Los Angeles, mourning ArcLight cinemas and soaking in the sun with her dogs. And I'll drop her Twitter and Instagram handles in the chat as well for folks who want to give those a follow. But I want to encourage folks, you can get in the chat. I see, folks are already in the chat, which is great. Kate Harlan, who is our other Queer Romance Book Club co-host, is here. So thank you, Kate, for being with us. I know we got some other book club folks with us in the chat, so feel free to say hi. And feel free to ask questions at any time. Kira will work those into the conversation. You can put them in the Q&A box, which is on the right-hand side, or you can drop them in the chat, and I'll put them in the Q&A box. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Kira. Thanks so much to you both for being with us tonight.
Thanks, ER.
Thank
you.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
It is so nice to have you here.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to talk about this book. As soon as we were asked if we would be interested in co-sponsoring the event, I was like, I would like an ARC, please. And I got it, and I was able to read it very quickly. So I've been looking forward to this conversation for a bit.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So I thought I would start out with kind of more of a generic thing. I've also actually read your other book that's coming out in May, which you co-wrote, Time Out. And so that's a different, not super different, but a different genre, YA romance, co-written. So I guess the first kind of conversation point I wanted to kick off for us is what drew you to romance as a genre? Why romance? Why this story as a romance?
So I think it's sort of like around the ether, but I actually originally wrote thrillers. Like when I was a kid, that's what I was originally drawn to. But I had romantic subplots. So it wasn't like it was never a thing. But I just had never, because I'd been so plot oriented, I didn't think I was capable of writing a story where like the high stakes is the romance is a relationship. And what ended up happening was, I wrote contemporary YA, like where it have again romantic subplots for a few years prior to this, but it was actually in 2019. I was doing a film job, like as mentioned in my bio. I was working for this manager, and she got one of her clients was in Crazy Rich Asians. And so it was around the romance book boom too. So I guess that was probably, like 2018, 2019. So I've been starting to read the books, but then when I watched that movie, I was like, wow, like I really feel moved by this. I just want to give it a try and just sort of see what happens. And so I was like, okay, like I want to write a rom-com. And it felt like the most obvious thing was I just was experiencing so much emotional turmoil being in my early 20s and like having all this job insecurity because Hollywood's awful. And then also like, sexual identity stuff. And so I was just like, I'm just gonna write a character that's like as much of a mess as me and just see what happens. So I think it just sort of came from like an interest in the genre from like almost the intellectual standpoint, and then wanting to sort of infuse something I was interested in, which like you're like my experience. I want to just write about my emotions. And then yeah, I just read a bunch more like adult rom-coms just to sort of get a sense of like what are the beats, what sort of tone do you have, like just really learn the mechanics of it, sort of like immerse myself in the like what, yeah, like the emotions you want to convey. And then yeah, now like I still like of course I read romance still to this day, and it's like become one of my staple genres. So it was fun, little journey.
That's great. So you mentioned that you read a bunch of other romance and got into it. So I guess that makes me think about like the what you had to kind of wrangle with as you were writing this. If you were getting inspired and thinking about tropes and thinking about structure, um, did you feel like you were really hampered by the romance expectations? I know a lot of folks feel that romance is really restrictive. Did you feel that? Were there things that you fought against, or things that you were like, I don't want to see, or I do want to see that?
I don't know if I felt restricted so much as intimidated. It's like, you know, that there's this long history, and like, you know, you're on Twitter. You see how much discourse will come up and how so much of it is about like trying to put romance down. So I was like, first and foremost, like, I don't want to do that. I want to like understand why all these tropes exist, why this structure exists, like, why do the readers want this, and like trying to honor that. And with that, I mean, I think what the biggest thing that I had to learn was like the tone in terms of like how dark you go and like what topics you'll touch on, and then how to touch on them in a way that like doesn't feel inauthentic or like it would disappoint the readers of the genre. So I think for me, it was like a lot of with Luna, like, how am I going to present her anxiety? How am I going to present this like really messy, like ultimately like not, I don't know if I'd say problematic, but like kind of problematic views she has going in about like sexuality, and like to what extent am I going to portray that? Is the arc clear enough to show that like that's not what the ultimate message of the book is? And just sort of making sure that like, yeah, that the readers have a sense of like, is this still fun? Because for sure I had to go through a couple drafts where it was like too sad, or it was just like too, it was too wrapped up in like how an anxious person would be. And I'm like, okay, this isn't, like I said, like this isn't fun anymore. So it was definitely just like trying to make sure that stayed was so important to me. And it took a lot of drafts. I swear, every rom-com I still write, I'm like, oh, it's too sad. Every single one, I'm like, I'm not gonna do it anymore. And every time there's something in there, I'm like, why did you put that tough topic in there? Was that really necessary? Like, it is, but like it always has to be adjusted a little bit.
Well, I'm sure your heart's speaking to like what what you
Yeah.
feel is true to the character, and what and the sort of topics you like to write about and read about. Um, you mentioned Luna, specifically how to make her, not, I guess, more appropriate for this genre versus, say, a thriller or a coming of age lit fic. Um,
Mhm.
I was really struck with how Luna's narrative voice is. So
Mhm.
she is a cinematographer, or a want to be cinematographer. And so often, the way she's thinking about the world and thinking about what she's experiencing is through that lens, literally that lens of cinematography. Like, here's how I would shoot this moment. Um, can you talk a little bit about uh, kind of maybe how that came about, or why that was important to you to have that be both her something she wanted to do, but also the way she narrates the book, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, so the decision to make her a cinematographer was it was quite simple. I could have written about a screenwriter because that's what I wanted to be, and I was just like, that's a little too close. Like, I don't want this to become like a self-insert. So I'm like, okay, what's something that's in a similar vein? And so when you're in screenwriting, they'll teach you like little bits of camera shorthand. They tell you not to use it, but it's like you sort of learn, the really basic stuff. So I was like, okay, I'll make her a cinematographer, and then I will do a lot of reading to find out exactly what that means. And the funny thing is, the camera sort of like lens that she like has her narration through, it was originally a screenplay. Like when I wrote it the first time back in like 2019, it was a screenplay, and there were all these montage sequences, and I was like, I don't want to get rid of these montage sequences. Like I really like them, and they like you said, they were part of her character. So I kind of like literally translated those into the book. And then one of the first notes my agent gave me was like, I want more of this to like really make it immersive and have it be part of the voice. And like, granted, that did trip me up for like a year, but eventually I was like, okay, like let's do this. Let's like make it as much there as possible. I think it's really great because I really do love when characters' passions like really bleed into the narrative and like you can't really it becomes part of their voice and like you can understand their distinctness is in part because of that. Because I feel like that's sort of like how I and like people around me are. Like you can't not talk to us without knowing about like what we're into. So I thought it ended up being a really like something I really liked about the book. So shout out to my agent for that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think it works really well, and I think it gives the story something that makes it I don't know makes it very memorable. I think about that as I'm reading it.
Thank you.
I look for it, and since I've finished reading it, I think about that neat perspective. So I think it's great.
Thank you.
Let's see. I guess since we're on Luna, let's talk about this being a queer coming of age romance, rom-com. But Luna very early in the book, before the start of the book realizes that, she is bisexual and wants to kind of slowly come out to those closest to her. And this becomes a big part of the plot. So I guess the question would be in terms of the coming of age, I guess then. So she makes that decision to come out, but it becomes one of the more plot heavy, the more difficult parts of the novel. Why was it important for you to tell the story from that perspective? What do you think that Luna's bisexuality adds to maybe the more generic tropey elements of romance?
I think I wanted it to like be the way it was just because I feel like there is not as many coming of age like queer coming of age stories when you're in your 20s. And so when I did that, I wanted to honor the fact that like the later you come out, the sort of more baggage you have to unpack. And sort of like the more complicated your situation will, I don't like, not obviously always, but it's sort of more likely to be. And so, and then again, like I was looking at other like coming of age stories, and it feels like it's either like the character will, I think they always like, if it's a queer narrative, they tend to come out in some way, but it feels like they come out to everyone in like a public forum or something like that, or even just like coming out to every character that they encounter. And I was like, okay, in the real world, like no one, at least the people I know, and like that's not necessarily what happens. It's like you pick and choose people, especially early on. So I kind of wanted to for sure have this take place. Like she didn't just figure, like it's not like she figures out that she's bi on the page, but she's also not at the stage where she's like totally comfortable with like everyone in her life knows it's not a big deal anymore. I just thought that was a really interesting moment to explore in a story about someone in their 20s. And then when it came and like and again someone who's like that confused, like in that state of like confusion, but also is able to still like, it's not that you're unlovable while you're in that stage. Like you can still find love, you can still find acceptance even if you aren't like all the way out, all the way totally comfortable, like fully your brightest, most rainbow proud self. Like I just really wanted to explore that in between space.
Yeah, I think I love that. I think that's exactly what I experienced reading it, because as someone who also came out later in life, I felt like the messiness of it was true to my experience. So I guess in terms of messiness, then that's a good segue into one of the other big parts of it, which is Hollywood, which is, I know you have, a history of working in Hollywood, and what compelled you, I guess, to want to set your story there? In terms of making that another thing for her to have to deal with as she's coming out, but also, it does feel maybe in a more stereotypical way that it's hard to make connections in a realm that is so like gilded, glitzy, glamorous, but kind of a seedy underbelly. So I guess if you could speak a little to that, like what was that like writing in that world?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess on like a really simple level, I was just like, that sounded fun. Like it was something that I kind of knew, and I was like, okay, like I actually do want to play because parts of it are so realistic. And that actually goes hand in hand with the Hollywood stuff because there's some parts that are so realistic. I was like, let's also just throw in like a little escapist element there. So like, and it also took it far away from my own life. Where I was like, she's gonna fall in love with a celebrity. That didn't happen to me. So that's gonna be my story now. But also, I wanted it to sort of match the themes of like, so there's the internal like identity struggle, but then there's also the way that in Hollywood, especially, I mean, this is kind of true in a lot of a lot of jobs. It's just that there's so much uncertainty, and like there is sort of, especially for young people, there's just no easy route that you're taking. It's a lot of like floundering around and being in between, where it's like, okay, I got my first job, but I'm not like the actual trade I wanted to be, especially for the workers who go through, it's sort of called the agency route, where like you basically go in, you want to be a creative, you do like direct, you want to be a director, you want to be a screenwriter, you want to be a cinematographer. But it's like there's no direct path to go into an agency office and you just do this job that like is not what you want to do at all. And all you do is like you hope you make a connection and you don't know if you're gonna get someone who's going to help you. So it's just, again, it's so much anxiety, so much stress, but it's like so much of like just working towards something you hope will happen and you hope it ends up okay. And I just thought it was interesting to have that be there, and then also to be able to play with the escapism of that, where like in the end Luna does get a job. And it's almost like I had a friend tell me like I care more that Luna got a job in the end than Luna getting love. Like that gave me more hope for my own life. And I was like, oh wait, that's actually really sweet.
I totally understand that, but I think it also speaks to the way that it's a parallel book. It's not just a romance; it's also a coming of age novel, and so I think you see both sides of that come to, no spoilers, but you see both sides of that come together in the end, and I really appreciated that for sure. Let's see. How about in terms of her friend group? So you give Luna a very best friend, Romy. Romy?
Mhm.
And the token straight guy, Wyatt. I guess would you speak a little bit about maybe character development, or in terms of like giving her folks that she could actually connect with, her brother, while she's going through all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think with that friend group, it was like I had just gotten out of college and I had a friend group like just like that, where it was like these people weren't out at the time, but like it was a bunch of like queer women and this one straight guy that like I think I had brought into the group because I had like dated him for like I think like 2 days or something, but he like had stuck around. And it was such a weird dynamic where you're like, I mean, I think Wyatt's a little bit more endearing than this guy was. No offense to him, he's watching this. He's not, but like basically, it was just funny, like to have sort of these. But it's like you straddle these two worlds, where it's like it was sort of showing that Luna like still had all this influence from sort of like cishet culture by being still friends with Wyatt. Again, will he pass the allied test in a few years? Sure. I don't know what's going to happen to him, but it's like you have friends that still exist sort of like in the friend groups you form before you're fully queer. And then there's also the idea of like you sort of gravitate toward other queer people even if you don't know. So I imagine that's kind of like what happened with her and Romy. And then it was like, also I have this friend Wyatt, like, will you be friends with him too? And she's just like, whatever, sure. And so I think like just showing like that, again, it's like a transition of friend groups. Again, they could stick together. I don't know. And then again, like, yeah, with her brother, it's like you just have all these straight people in your life and you don't really know like how they're going to fit in after you sort of reinvent yourself, to whatever extent that happens. Like even if it's all internal, I feel like it sort of changes the way you view everyone in your life, like the queer folks and the straight folks, of like, how do I relate to you differently? So I definitely just wanted to have like the diversity of having Luna have to experience like all these different kinds of people. And then I don't know, I thought it was nice that, I mean, originally Romy definitely played more of a mentor role. Like I had to like make Luna in later drafts like give more friendship back, and like it might still be off, but like I think it's so important to sort of show that like friends do that, where there's so much like giving in the friendship of just sort of helping your friends through something that you've already experienced, and how lovely that is, and then how you can then pass that on to like the next person that comes out, I'm not going to say it's younger, like it could be someone who's your age or older, but like the next person has to experience that. I think it's so important to be able to show like that. Yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to do that, but also like you have to be aware of like not over giving. So
I think it's really good that Luna has these kinds of friends / mentors in the community that can really show her, like here's a place that is welcoming to you. There's a place where you can be. And I guess that speaks to Valeria and her mentorship role. And again, I'm trying not to spoil
yeah.
plot points, but having an older and to the greater world of the Hollywood of the book, a closeted queer person. She takes on a role where she, I guess I'm leading into this other theme of the story, which is Luna's ideas about sexuality and about what constitutes losing one's virginity and what constitutes real sex. And I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about, especially in a romance, and definitely in a queer romance. And we're the queer romance book club. So I feel like thinking about Valeria as a character and why you, I guess not why, but you decided to paint her in a way that was, as you kind of alluded to earlier, larger than life, kind of the ideal. What sort of inspirations did you have there in terms of, queer mentorship, folks who were, kind of led Luna along her journey?
Yeah, I mean, with Val, the funny thing was, like, I imagine that she has no idea what's going on. Like, she's just trying to, like, I don't know, have this little fling and, like, just, or, like, she's trying to develop this romance, and then she has no idea that Luna's, like, a complete mess and, like, is overthinking literally everything they do. But I think that also, like, I think with the inception of Val, there's this interesting culture, like in our culture in general, where you have so many people who like kind of label certain celebrities as gay, and like and it's like privacy, like we may never find out if a lot of these celebrities are. But it's like there are these interesting signs that like you could confirm with someone confirm with someone in like who's actually in your life, like, oh, they do X, Y, and Z. And then you end up finding out they're queer. But like with celebrities, you'll never know that. So I just thought it was interesting to be like, okay, what would it be like for one of these celebrities that like probably the world has identified as gay, but like she's not gonna come out. Or, she hasn't done that yet. So like, I just thought, I just wanted to play with that a little bit. I just think it's an interesting dynamic. And then it's an interesting parallel back to Luna, where it's like, I kind of know what you're going through right now, even though I am like 20 steps ahead of you in my personal life. Because there is that added layer of like, well, I'm not going to tell everyone and I feel comfortable with that. And then sort of how that can shift over time. But in terms of her mentorship, I mean, that was actually something that it got developed into the book more and more. Because basically we wanted to make sure that like, you could tell that Luna is like a biased narrator where like, she's really going off of her own thoughts. And then a lot of it is fueled by anxiety. Like, I think to some extent she wouldn't be this fixated on virginity if it wasn't for the fact that like, she was connecting it to all these ideas of like, oh, like, will society accept me? Can I still like, that kind of stuff. It's all connected to that. But it's like, if you say it out loud, it sounds so kind of ridiculous. And I just wanted to write a character who was like so behind that, like, if someone was also grappling with these same questions, they wouldn't feel as isolated from that. And again, but like to counter that, every single character needed to be like, Luna, please, sweetie, that's not how this works. Like, and again, like, I think it goes to the step where she's probably annoying, but I'm like, you know what? She can be annoying about this. That's fine. But yeah, so like, I think there just had to be people who were just, and it's Romy and Valeria mostly. I'm sure if like Wyatt had something to say, he probably would have agreed. Been like, yeah, penetration is sex. That's clearly what you have to do. Like, that's his. It probably makes sense for him. But every other character had to be like, no, no, please stop. Like, this is what, and so I think it is important to some extent to sort of have these like very base level conversations, just because I'm sure people think it, like even if it's an embarrassing thing to be thinking, I have to assume to some extent people are one, you have to be like, okay, like, what are the rules here? I'm new to this part of town. Like, what do we do? And so I thought it'd be fun to sort of just play with that and just have that conversation. And of course, like in the end, she finally believes someone when they said it for probably the fourth time in the book. And it's okay. Well, it might take you a while to learn, but that's okay.
She had to process it and had to feel it. Yeah, and I think, that really sticks out too in terms of, I guess, her baby gayness, her baby queerness. I remember early on in the book, you make a point of saying like that there's an age difference there between her and Valeria, and then later on, at first I'm like, that's only like 4 years. It's not a freaking deal.
Yeah, I know.
You very quickly realize, oh no, that's a gap for them. That's a gap for her because of how she's, how she is so new to the world, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's also it's like the idea of like she's also had this many extra years to process it, because I think Val mentioned this, like she's known she was gay since she was 19, so it's like, it's not a 4-year age difference. It's like I've had, I don't know if it's like 10 years to process it, and I've had like 1 month. Like it's almost like not realizing that's what you're actually counting, but like that is what is being processed.
Yeah,
it's almost like you get a new age.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that it comes across very effectively how different their experiences are, for sure. So we talked a little bit earlier about that you read novels to kind of get in the genre, but are there specific romances? I know you mentioned Crazy Rich Asians, but are there certain romances or even certain stories that inspired you in the writing of this?
Yeah, I mean, so at the time it was like, so Rachel and Solomon sort of been like, she's one of my mentors. We met in 2016, I think. Like we did a mentoring contest. And so I watched her go from YA to adult. So I read all her books along the way. So she was sort of the first romance I feel like that I read. I think The X Talk came out in like, I don't know math anymore, in 2020, but I think I read it in like 2019-ish. And so that was actually one of the first ones where it was, because she's so good that I feel like it was sort of my first like on the ground, like, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like. Like this is someone who's like studied it. This is how a writer who's also writing I was familiar with, like how they did romance. And you can sort of see how the writing changed, which was also helpful for me because I had like been writing in other age categories and genres. And then from there, I'm like trying to remember. I mean, Ali Hazelwood books are of course like classic. And then there were just a bunch of other like romance authors. And again, like all my friends were getting into romance like at that time. So I was reading all their books. So like Courtney Kay in the Event of Love was one I read. That was one of my first queer romances. Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner. Again, that was actually one of the first. It was the first, I think it was first FF and the first like Hollywood romance where you're like, okay, what do the gays do in Hollywood? And like, yeah, there's probably a bunch that I'm not thinking of, like trying to look at a wall right now. Oh yeah, Casey McQuiston was a huge
Oh,
so it was like Casey McQuiston was also teaching, like it was coming of age where like the characters were young, because that was another thing where like you tended to see romance heroines who were in their 30s or late 20s and like they had their lives together. So it was also really nice to be able to see more younger protagonists. And like that book, like Red, White, and Royal Blue also had a coming out storyline. So it was like, okay, what does that look like in this storyline? Like, how can I sort of reflect any of those elements that fit with my story?
Are there films too? So, I mean, obviously, this is a very film influenced, inspired. Were there any films that come to mind when you think of writing this?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't know if I was thinking of them while I was writing it. I feel like when I write things, it's more like it's either really specific and I'm like, I'm writing this actor a book, or it'll be more general, just being like, oh, like I was writing just a comedy that would fit into like the film lexicon of today. But then when I reflected back on it, like Booksmart, I think like when I watched that again, like after I'd written this book, I was like, oh yeah, like that really does fit with the themes of like being a mess and like figuring out sexuality and like sort of breaking out of like a mold you put yourself in. And then when I watched Devil Wears Prada again, like that also, I was like, oh, that's where all the like that's what I was thinking of that whole time. I mean, obviously, like it came from real life experiences, but I think Devil Wears Prada also came from real life experiences put into film. So I was like, oh, okay, I can take my real life experiences and put it into film like this, or in books in this case. But yeah.
So, I guess then I want to kind of lead us into an ending portion with just talking about what you like in general. So, what sort of things are you into? What sort of media do you generally consume? I know you mentioned you play video games. What sort of video games are you into?
Oh my God. So media wise, I'm pretty like, I'll go all over the place. It's basically just like good characters. So like the things that come to mind right now, I mean, I guess I do more lean toward genre and like thriller and stuff like that. But again, it's very random. Like especially when it comes to TV and film, it comes out of nowhere. So like right now, I really like Succession, which again, it's like just a character drama with rich people. I really liked House of the Dragon. I'm just naming off HBO shows right now. What else? Yellow Jackets. I really love Yellow Jackets. That's kind of like if I was just writing like purely what's in my head, like that is probably where my brain goes the most. So like gay violence with women is very prominent for me. I'm trying to think of something light that I watch because I know I watch lighter stuff too.
You don't have to. You don't necessarily need to recommend anything.
I know. I'm like okay, somewhere in there, I'm watching lighter stuff too, and I can't think of what it is right now. And then I don't even know, like video game wise, honestly, I play the same PlayStation 2 game from like my childhood, and I'm just trying to get all my friends who never played it to play it. It's like called Sly Cooper, and it's like a little heist game with a raccoon.
Yeah.
And that was like clearly where all the thriller thing came from, because I was just like, all right, this is like Kill Bill for children. And then years later, when I learned what Kill Bill was, I was like, okay, this is what I want.
Amazing.
This is what I was always meant to do. But yeah, so I just play the same game over and over again. I played like, Animal Crossing and like the new Zelda game. I'm like really excited for that. And yeah, otherwise, like I think I spend my time. I also do a lot of like say nonfiction. Yeah, like I watch a lot of like theme park documentary and like YouTube sort of documentary where like, if you just like look at a topic and you're like, I'm gonna go down this hole tonight.
Yeah.
Let's go learn about like I need to think of an example. I don't know, like the building of some random ride in Universal Studios in the 70s. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go do that. Like stuff like that. So and often has to do with like either pop culture or again, theme parks for some reason, true crime, like or any mixture of those things, because often they all come together. Yeah. But like, yeah, just like very random things, which I think that might be like a lot of my storylines, you're like, where did that come from? Yeah.
Well, I think your characters, at least Luna, have varied interests, which I think, speaks to the human experience, but also clearly speaks to your experience. Like they're not just into one thing. They like a lot of different things. We actually have a question from the viewership. If you had to cast Sizzle Reel as a movie, who would you choose to play each character? We'll just go with
I was asked this before, and I like told myself to like come up with more answers. But so like Val, I'd always imagined as Brie Larson. That was like a thing because I was like going through a stage in 2019, and I was like, okay, that's that.
You said Brie Larson?
Yeah, Brie Larson. And then because she was one of those celebrities who like everyone thought was gay, but only in 2019. I don't know. I could explain why, but I don't want to spend time like revealing that I know why. And then I think with Romy, I would just want a non-binary actor. Like, I'm really open to like just whoever's out there. I feel like, yeah, I can't think of anyone, but like that was definitely something that would be very important to me. And then with Luna, again, I like know this actress's name, but the only way I could explain to you who this is like she was in Short Term 12, which was like an indie movie from 2013 or something. Caitlin something. And now again, not gonna know. I'm not gonna look it up, but like, no, she was in Booksmart. Okay, the main gay one in Booksmart. What is her name?
Anyone knows? Tell us.
Someone knows.
Oh, look in the
Someone
chat.
put it in the chat. That is who I would cast as.
Oh, everyone's excited about you playing Sly Cooper.
Oh, I'm glad. I could talk about that more if you want.
I don't know if anyone knows. Maybe somebody will do. Oh,
there we go. Caitlin Dever. Yes.
Dever.
Yeah. Dever. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
That's what I said. Thank you.
Amazing. So that is the perfect Luna, essentially.
Mm-hmm. I think she nails that awkward so well. Yeah.
There's a good, Meryl Streep, Devil Wears Prada, in Alice, who is for those of you who have not read the book, which maybe a few of you, it only came out last Tuesday. Alice is Luna's just repulsive Hollywood agent boss. So I feel like there'd be a good, nasty old character actor role there for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's where like I want, if like an actress like led production company of someone who's like not really young, I just want them to do like, that's their cameo. They're like, I'm gonna play this terrible role.
I love that. Well, are we interested in some more questions, or do we want to talk more about Sly Cooper? I'm super down with that.
Oh my God. Whichever. Just let me know, guys.
How about music? Do you have like a Sizzle Reel playlist?
So sort of, it was like whenever I make my own playlists, they're like the worst thing ever, because I literally just do it by like whatever song I have stuck in my head that day will go into like a book playlist, or it'll just be like if a song is mentioned in a book, and it could be a joke, like I could be making a joke about Smash Mouth and I will put Smash Mouth into the book playlist, even though it has no tonal like significance. Otherwise, like I listen to so much like 2000s pop punk that like when I think of these books, even if the music does not make sense, I will put them in because it's like, oh, in my mind, this rom-com hero is My Chemical Romance. And you're like, if anyone like looks at the playlist, they'd be like, what? Like, it makes sense in my head. But then someone who works at the publisher made a real playlist that makes sense.
Is it? Oh, where is it? We've got to find it and link it.
Oh, I need to like publicly link it. But like that has a lot of like Fletcher and like, yeah, like people who are known for being like queer icons. And I was like, thank you. And then I had to learn who all these people were, because I don't listen to that much modern music. Like someone has to like hand it over to me, and then I'll be like, oh, this is good. But like that's how I learned about new music, and so they helped me. So now I can be like Fletcher, the Aces, a little bit of Halsey. Like I can help now. Now I can do it because of Friends.
Hey, that's what friends are for. My experience is exactly the same. Folks give me music and I'm like, this is amazing, but I rarely find it on my own. We have a question. Do you play Fortnite?
That's probably from my friend I play Fortnite with. Yeah, so in the pandemic, basically, like I had never done shooter games because they're all first person and I like can't do that. But Fortnite isn't. It's third person. And so I was like, I can do that. I mean, like then I would get into gaming sessions. It was like my grad school friend and her husband, and they were both very good. And so they just kind of tolerated me. Amazing. And like I think at some point I got like mediocre at it. And now I can like join a group and not immediately die. Like, I say that and then I would just immediately die. But like I think I'm like okay. I'm okay now. I'm much better at Sly Cooper, let's be honest. But,
we have another question. I love how you said you were looking for Kill Bill. Could you say more about why you love thriller as a genre?
Yeah. Oh yeah, let's just go into it. It was just my original love. I remember like, again, so I played these games when I was younger. They were all sort of thriller themed. The first book I wrote was like inspired by The Dark Knight. I think it was just the idea of like, there's an interesting amount of structure in thrillers because you have to maintain the plot so intricately that like comforted me, where I was like, okay, I can write this because I know exactly what has to be in it. And like, so you have to maintain tension. You have to like, you try to end every chapter on a cliffhanger. There's like a very sort of clear like arc you have to go through, and you kind of understand like it's life or death. So it felt more like I knew what I was doing. And then it just also, it had a certain amount of freedom to it where you could delve into darker things. Like that kind of made sense because I feel like I was telling someone the other day, like the difference between like rom-com and thriller is like it comes down to the prose of like a character will tell an anecdote, and it's like in a rom-com you wouldn't have that anecdote be that like, oh, so and so, I watched so and so die or something. Like, okay, even if that did happen to you, Luna, I can't put it in here because that doesn't fit the tone we're going for. Whereas like in another piece, in a thriller, like I try to infuse humor as much as I can, where I'm like, I can either make this funny or not. And like being able to have the two choices really appeals to me. Like, granted, now there's such an interesting amount of fusion going on with like, there are so many rom-coms that involve like adventure or murder. Like I feel like there was a Christina Lawrence. Someone just put out like a really prominent like romance author just put out a romance, or like a romance in the romance sphere where like I feel like someone dies like in the very beginning. Just like, that's so funny. Like I love this. It feels like the way they write dark comedies in film, where like there is so much of like, I don't know, game night where you're just like there's a bunch of murder going on with all these jokes. And I like that that's coming into books because like I'm like, yes, I love this. This holds my attention in a different way. And I feel like one day I'll have to write one.
I think that there's a lot more cross-genre pollination, like you're saying. If you're looking for a good, well, I'll say it's slow burn, but it's marketed as romance, and I think a thriller. It's Ali Theron's Liar City, which I think Kate also has read that now. But it's, I mean, literally, I was like, this isn't much of a romance. It is romance. There's romance. It is romantic, but it is a thriller first and foremost.
Yeah.
And it's very good. We have another question. What profession would your characters work in if they weren't in their current roles? Alice, Luna, Romy, Val. Alice.
Okay, let's see. So Val would definitely be a professor. I feel like there was like very seated in there that like she had a previous life where she was going to go into academia. Luna, I think, would probably be like one of those perpetual grad student people who like, you know, like I feel like she would get like a PhD in like film studies or something and just like stay in school until like as long as physically possible. Romy, so she is kind of a writer, but I feel like, like she'd be a writer who's actually like just a writer as opposed to a writer and a barista. But what else would she do? I mean, I think she has a lot of options out there. But oh, and then Luna also could be a tour guide because that's kind of mentioned where like she knows LA really well. So Luna actually, she would be a grad student and also be a tour guide. That's Luna's life. Yeah, I think Romy would. I feel like she would also be willing to like she would work in theater. She would work in just like being around places of performance. I think is something that she really likes. And then Alice, oh man, I mean, she should. Let's see, what would Alice do? What do these people do? I'm like trying to think of what any executive I know of like does. I feel like they retire and then they like go play golf.
Yeah.
Do you like join hedge funds? Maybe she could join a hedge fund. I feel like she could go work in finance. Go be a girl boss in finance.
Yelly and high stakes. That totally tracks.
I would have said she should go home and take care of her kids, but like she doesn't have to do that.
No.
That's okay.
Yeah. I think Romy too. Romy seems happy and with whatever they're doing, right? Like, so
yeah,
even a barista, you know, like I think it totally makes sense that they'd find that anywhere. Let's see if there's any questions in the chat. Romy is just professionally hot is one of the comments.
Yeah,
true.
That's true.
Curious to which MCR album songs was accompanying you while writing. I think we sort of answered this, but
all
specific.
It's the Black Parade. That's like my main one. I really like the theatricality of that one, and it makes me feel like all the emotions characters are feeling are like really deep and like impressive and important, even if like it's something like a silly moment. So I always like that because they think it's very important, right? And I guess I'm supposed to be taking it seriously too. But like those characters, they're like, yeah, this is life or death. I'm being taken into the afterlife and being shown all my terrible moments in life. Yeah.
Well, I believe, do we want to give a second for anybody else who wants to ask a question? Let's see what we got. May have someone typing.
Mm. All the pressure's on whoever was typing.
Can we see your bookshelf?
Oh, let's see. Let's see if like all my other objects don't like cover it up. I mean, so that's like part of it. I'm trying to get to the. Oh, there's a lamp that's covering it. Okay, hold
Oh,
on.
you've got the color.
It's rainbow, and so let's see. Now there's like a red up top, and I'm gonna break my desktop showing, and then if you go down, like I did the rainbow setup. Like I had seen that aesthetic so much, and now my Jodie Foster picture is also like creeping into the frame, which is so good for professionality.
It's perfect.
Oh no, now it's just there. What did I have it at before to where I was like hiding my dignity? But no, it's fine. I also have a picture of Jodie Foster on the wall because like everyone had like, you know where like people in Britain have they used to have those pictures of Queen Elizabeth. I thought it would be funny. Originally I was gonna put Princess Diana there, but then like somehow that didn't end up happening. And then I like found this photo of Jodie Foster and I was like, I'm gonna put that there and it's gonna be like that is my Queen of England. And just everyone has to deal. And that's on my work calls. It's great.
I love that. We have another question. I really liked your choice to make Romy the more experienced queer, but also still in the process of figuring out her non-binary identity. Can you talk more about that choice?
Yeah, I mean, I just think I just wanted to have a real range of different kinds of queer experiences. And so one of them is obviously it's the process of like a lot of people will figure out their sexuality before their gender identity. And yeah, I just thought that was like a really interesting, important thing to talk about. At first, I was kind of intimidated because I'm like, I'm not non-binary. Like, what do I know about that? But like, I had a lot of sort of trans friends read it. Like one friend in particular who was really like you need to press down on this. Like, make this a part of the story if you're going to make her non-binary. And I was like, okay, like you're right. I need to just lean into it. And then we got sensitivity readers, and like there were probably at least like there were definitely a lot of different trans readers who sort of got to get their take on a storyline. But it was this really interesting moment where like that one scene where they're watching TV and Luna realizes that like the actor on screen is non-binary and that Romy probably feels the same kind of like feeling of community watching that Luna feels watching bi actors. And then like we have that moment where Romy is kind of like questioning which pronouns to use. Like it came later. That scene wasn't in there originally. And again, it was like that intimidation of me not wanting to go there stuck around for so long. But once it did get in there, it became like one of my favorite scenes. And I feel like it almost illustrates the feeling of being sort of like new and exploration, like not gonna say better than all the other stuff that Luna experiences, but like it really hits it home in a way that I ended up really liking. So hopefully everyone else likes it too.
Well, I certainly did. Thank you so much, Carlyn. This has been wonderful. What a treat. Love hearing all your recommendations. Love hearing all your insights into this fantastic novel. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to ER to close us out.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. This was such a fun event, and getting to hear more about all the different aspects of the book and the background ideas of characters. It's always a great opportunity. So thanks so much for taking the time to be with us, Carlyn, and thank you, Kara, for the awesome questions, and thank you to the Queer Romance Book Club folks for being with us tonight. So if folks are super hyped to read Sizzle Reel and you haven't gotten your copy yet, you can click this teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy Sizzle Reel from Charis Books and More. It really does help us when you buy your event books from us. So please consider doing that. You can also, of course, request the book from the library. It is always a good thing to request books from the library. Try and get it in the public library wherever you live. You can buy a copy and donate it to a high school or college library, because we want these kinds of books accessible to queer teens and young adults. So get it out there. We think that it's fine for them to read adult books. It's not YA, but that's fine. We all read adult books when we were teens. So get the good word out. Let people see what is possible in their future. As always, come back and see us. This Saturday is Independent Bookstore Day. The Independent Bookstore Day crawl is happening all of this week, so you can visit any independent bookstore in Georgia that's participating and get your card stamped to be entered for fun prizes and things like that. So, and then come see us on Saturday to close out the celebration. So, once again, thank you all so much, and until next time, take care.